Good evening, everybody out there. Hope you are all safe at your own place in this frightening and stressful COVID pandemic lockdown. I am sure you all are working as warriors at your workplace and also taking care of your near and dear ones. We all now agree that every day we are getting lots of new guidelines, review articles, commentary related to COVID 19. Many a times we feel we are bursting with so much of information that how much to absorb and what not to absorb is very difficult to be sure. So we at Medanta Hospital Ranchi critical care department, we thought of something different, that why not we'll discuss something practical for the young intensivist, young anesthesiologist who are actually doing all the hard work at the bedside or at the community level. So we thought of a lecture series that will be presented every week or almost 8 10 days in difference, so that it will come handy and young intensivists will brush up their existing knowledge, and that will be also helpful to face the pandemic in a better way. So I welcome all of you to the first lecture of this series, which is airway management of a suspect or a diagnosed COVID-19. So with me, we have experts from India as well as Australia. So from India, I have my senior colleague, Dr. Arindam Kaur. Everybody knows him. He's the Director Critical Care at CMRI Hospital, Kolkata. And my friend, Dr. Sananta Das, who is Senior Fellow from Townsville, Queensland, Australia. So definitely, I will be also requesting them to share their experience, what they think, what they are doing in their own hospitals, in their own country. So I'm sure next 30 minutes or so of my talk would be definitely interesting and informative. Kindly send questions or query during my presentation. If you think anything is coming in your mind, I will be happy along with my experts to discuss them. I will try to start with a positive note. We all know this picture has come in the Time magazine front cover, and I hope you all have seen this. And this is about the anesthesiologist and the intensivist who are working as the frontline warriors. So the region being intensivist and anesthesiologist are right now taking the lead role, because they are tackling the most crucial juncture of a patient's life, as well as the most vulnerable part for the doctors also, for the nurses also, and the paramedics, because the patient is actually fighting with failing respiratory system, and that starts with the airway. We all know that. For a for an airway expert like anesthesiologist or intensivist who are working day in and day out, it may not be a big problem to secure the airway, but definitely it's really difficult to work in a COVID pandemic in their own hospital, because the patient is having highly contagious airway, and also they need to secure the airway also at the earliest, because if we are delaying, the patient is actually crashing in front of us, and if we are not taking proper care, maybe the patient is actually creating problem for us, that we may be infecting others as well as ourselves. So securing the and managing the airway is really stressful and tasking for the doctors, nurses, and paramedics. Also, it is also important for the patient. If you are delaying the intubation, maybe the chances of survival is also very less. So definitely we need to act swiftly, fast, but also with safety. So let's start with few hard facts about COVID pandemic. We all know from the worldwide literature or whatever we are getting information from China, from Italy, from USA, and from India, 5 to 10% of total admission they require ICU admission. Total hospital admission, that out of that 5 to 10% require ICU admission, and many require urgent intubation out of these 5 to 10% for profound and sudden hypoxia. As the time goes on, maybe after 15 days, 1 month, the community spread will be there, definitely. And more asymptomatic, but they may be infective also, they will present for unrelated diseases related to respiratory system, and maybe they will present to our hospital for urgent surgery for something else. So even a slight mistake in any of the infection control, maybe they would endanger the whole team safety. So that is the real concern for everybody to know about how to secure the airway. So to start with, I will start with some disclaimers. First, this presentation only shows the frameworks in a systematic and emphasized manner, because we are all experts in airway. I am not here to tell about what to do first, what to do next. But yes, it has to be systematic and emphasized in a pandemic like COVID right now. Then it will definitely address not to only a single area of the hospital, may not be only ICU, it also applies to the OR, the emergency department, or also in the ward also if the patient crashes or have cardiac arrest. Definitely, I request all of you to modify it as per your local expertise, resource availability, and also best practices. Till now, you will all agree that whatever we are getting, information or literature is saying, they are only based on weak evidence, because this has never happened before, COVID-19 pandemic. And most articles, whatever has been published in last maybe 2 months or 3 months, they have either observational data or opinion based. And finally, I will not go for any detailed theory discussion. It will be more of practical and what are the things we should remember or we should do at the bedside. Coming to the risk to healthcare workers, why we have kept the first lecture as airway intubation or airway management of COVID suspect. Because the transmission of COVID, we all know, primarily through droplet and fomite, not typical aerosol based. But yes, during airway management, we create so many aerosol generating events that actually present as a potential risk of infection to the healthcare workers. So for that reason, WHO and CID, they have actually classified this as high consequence infectious disease. They have labeled this as high consequence infectious disease. We all know treating is a different thing, but maybe if our healthcare workers will fall ill during the treatment and they will be labeled as quarantine, maybe that will diminish the available resources which are having our hospital or our country is having. So definitely there will be diminishing the available resources and will have serious problem when the demand of the the resources will be there. So definitely we have to be optimistic and we have to treat with proper care and with proper guidelines or maybe with checklist. We'll discuss in detail. So my outline of my presentation for today, we'll discuss principles of COVID pandemic airway management in stepwise manner. We'll definitely address airway rescue practices in this type of patients, and also it will cater to all the places in our hospital, as I have already told, ICU, OR, emergency ward, and also few unplanned episodes like cardiorespiratory arrest if happens to your patient, how you will secure the airway. First, we need to know that COVID-19 pandemic is not actually directly creating aerosol generation, but during our airway management, it is named as aerosol generating events. So we need to know what are the aerosol generating events that we should be careful for. That is coughing, sneezing, if the patient is on NIV or any form of ventilation with inadequate seal. Then high flow nasal cannula. So definitely whenever you are using any room for airway management, you have to clean the room 20 minutes after doing the last aerosol generating event or intubation. That we have to remember. The principle behind is at least 4 to 5 air exchanges should be there. So 20 minutes, 4 to 5 exchanges. We normally recommend 12 air exchanges in an hour for the proper decontamination or sterilization. Coming to the equipment part, disposable is always preferred over reusable, and you have to prepare your airway trolley as well as the medication outside of the intubating room or in your where the patient is there. I have created a picture here, so how your pre-oxygenation and your non-breathing mask bag will be there, how you should fit it. Your mask is here. Your viral filter will be directly connected to the mask. There should not be any gap between or any other connection is there. Then EtCO2 adapter, because you have to monitor the EtCO2, and there will be one PEEP valve which will be connected after that, and then it will be connected to the bag. So this will be the normal equipment you have to keep ready. Then airway equipment. The airway equipment, everything you have to keep ready. The most important things are video laryngoscope, Mapleson C circuit, because you do not want the air to be exhaled with aerosols. Then second generation supraglottic airway, because the less chance of leak is there, like your ProSeal or your Suprema, all this stuff. Then you also have to have one clamp which you are actually disconnecting at any point of time. So you have to first clamp the tube and then do the procedure, and then you have to connect. And you all know the major airway equipments, the tie, the suctioning catheter, inline suctioning catheter, NG tube, then airway, then bougie, stellate, and also you should also have one option of emergency front of neck airway kit, which if you are actually dealing with some difficulty in oxygenation and ventilation, you may need to do at that time. So you don't need to actually run here and there to find that. And the typical circuit setup, patient is here, so you have to then attach the face mask or ET tube, and viral filter, which is of major concern, you need to attach that, and then EtCO2, and finally the ventilator. So coming to the team part, so you have to have one strong team, but yes, the team members should be less, because you have to take care of your staffs. Then use the best available staff. It's not like anybody is coming and you are making him or her a team member. You have to considering the age factor, if it is more than 60 years or immunosuppressed, or if the patient is pregnant or in having any comorbidity like CKD or maybe CLD or maybe heart hypertension, diabetes. So you have to think about excluding the staff because they are more vulnerable for infection. And also you have to allocate clearly defined role for each of your member. It's not like you have 5-member team, but you are actually not giving any proper idea what to do. Then coming to the team members, who will be the team members? So you can see here, the patient is there in the middle, and you can see the airway operator number 1, who will be the primary person dealing with the intubation part. So you can see here the picture here in the middle. Then there will be an airway assistant who will be there if you need any help like bougie, stellate or anything like that. So that person will help you. There will be another person you can see here, team leader. So he will be or she will be taking care of the medication part, the monitoring part. So that's the thing he has to or she has to do. There will be also another person who will be the runner. So he or she will be taking care of anything if you want from the anteroom or from outside. So he will be running from the inside of the room to outside the room. And this room will be completely negative pressure room, ideally. And inside that room, you have the COVID tray. In that, you keep your intubating materials like your tube, already we have discussed, and also all the medications. One part, you have to prepare a pre-medication from outside and bring that to your COVID room where you will intubate. Outside the room, there will be anteroom, there will be another runner who will be actually taking care of the thing. If you need something else, then he will be or she will be actually giving it to the runner number 1. And then totally outside, you keep every emergency tray, airway tray or cardiac arrest tray, trolley, bronchoscope, everything outside. So this is the normal arrangement of outside room, ante room, and then the inside room where you are actually going for the intubation. Then coming to the planning, you have to have one meticulous airway assessment if the patient has difficult airway, and you have to document it properly. Then as per the patient, you have to individualize your strategy, how you should go for the airway management. You should go for back mask ventilation, you should go for the supraglottic airway device, or you will directly go for rapid sequence induction. And also you should have in mind what are the defined triggers for moving between each plan. And as you are the intensivist or the airway expert who will be the primary person dealing with the management, you should also have the ventilation plan, that if you are intubating, then immediately you are planning for the proning, you are planning for some like extracorporeal membrane oxygen device, something like that. So the ventilation plan, if you are going for high PEEP, you are going for like recruitment maneuver, so that plan has to be there also when you are actually assessing the airway. So this is the normal picture which is suggested if the patient is during your assessment looks like he or she is hyperventilating, you can suggest to keep one surgical mask just above your mouth and nose, and then the oxygen mask. This is the typical, like you can ensure so that the aerosol generation will be less for the healthcare workers. Then coming to the communication part. Pre-briefing, you have to discuss the challenges anticipated, the strategy, the post-intubation plans, as I have already discussed. The language should be clear, simple, and concise. There should not be any difficult things which the normal staffs will not be able to understand, because everybody will be in PP inside the intubating room. That is the concept. Then you should have your voices raised so that everybody will be hearing you properly. If your hospital is having audio-visual system, then it's well and good. Otherwise, you can keep one mobile in the speaker mode, and the other person who is in the ante room or outside room, they will be directly talking to you. In case you are having any difficulty, then the other person will be immediately getting the information. Or else, if that is not there, a simple whiteboard and a marker pen is well enough to handle the situation. You should, all of your team members should use standardized language, no dictionary words which will be difficult for the other person to understand. And finally, you should ensure that the communication has to be closed loop. There should not be anything which the other person is actually not understanding. And speaking up is encouraged, because here you are not able to actually get help from outside like in other cases. Coming to the cognitive aids. Why cognitive aids? This is a really tasking procedure and tasking environment. The patient is having COVID, everybody is having fear in their mind. Who will be the person doing the intubation or getting the infection? So definitely you should have something in your mind how to increase or improve the cognitive function of everybody, every member of your team. Because here, a simple mistake from a single team member are actually jeopardizing your every effort or your total dedication to the management of the patient. So you should have a kit dump mat. You should use routinely intubation checklist, or maybe you can take the algorithm or cognitive aid to the room, your intubating room, and display there. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to remember everything in stress. When the patient is having coughing, you are actually unable to secure the airway. Then in this, I will actually quote one pandemic airway checklist. This has been devised by emergency critical care. I have taken from that. They are actually using to enhance the shared mental models among everybody and also maintain the cognitive bandwidth to increase the safety of the healthcare workers. And also there will be body checks, like one person will be actually cross monitor the team members' performance so that the efficiency is actually better. And this it looks like this 5-step COVID cognitive aid, COVID, and in each C, coordinate, collect, colleague. O, you can go through this. This is just one framework how you should have cognitive aid in your hospital, in your ICU. Then personal protective equipments. We all know this. I am not going into detail, but you should have the proper PPE for airway operator, airway assistant, and team leader, because at any point of time they need to perform not only intubation, also EFONA, that is emergency front of neck airway maneuver. You should ensure that each of your members should have clean safe, because N95 mask fits well, there will not be any leak. This also applies to the patients, depending on the preference. The intubator who is intubating should use double glove. We know the region, and also you should ensure that there should not be any fog behind your goggle and also your eyewear. So you should use some defogging agents for the goggles and eyewear. Then the process of airway management. We all know as an anesthetist or intensivist what are the steps, but we will discuss the major parts. Pre-oxygenation, induction, intubation, airway rescue if anything goes haywire, and finally the post-intubation part, or the part which we are dealing in ICU just after the intubation part. Pre-oxygenation, very important, is at least 5 minutes of pre-oxygenation is mandatory, because these patients get hypoxic immediately. They are normally hypoxic, and if you are actually delaying with intubation or having some problem during intubation, then the patient will definitely go into severe hypoxia and finally maybe suffer from arrest. Ensure that during stress that you should turn off the high flow oxygen prior to removing the face mask or nasal cannula during the pre-oxygenation. Remove all facial hair on admission from the patient, and normally you should go ahead with 2% technique for pre-oxygenation and double hand technique. I will show you how it looks like. So you can see here the picture says it everything. The intubator is actually using or holding the face mask with 2 hands, and the other person, the airway assistant, is actually pre-oxygenating using the bag valve mask ventilation. So there are 2 persons with 2 hand technique. Normally we use in this not CE technique, rather VE technique. How does VE helps? You can see here, it is the V and it is the E, not typical C and E. That gives you a better grip and less chance of leak around the mask. Coming to the pre-oxygenation part, here there will not be any auscultation or stethoscope use. So better to go ahead with continuous waveform capnography. And if you are going ahead with NIV during pre-oxygenation, normally it is not preferred. But if you are using at all, then you should ensure that there should not be any expiration of the expired gas, or the expired air is actually coming to the room, so that other persons are not infected. And you must use viral filter between the face mask and the circuit. High flow nasal oxygen is not recommended for apneic oxygenation during intubation. The pre-oxygenation part, again the circuit looks like this. If you are using BiPAP or mask for the pre-oxygenation part, this is the typical arrangement how you should go ahead with the setup. The viral filter is fitted to the BiPAP directly, and then the catheter mount, then this is the oxygen port, then the PEEP valve and the back mask. Coming to the induction part, rapid sequence induction as the default technique here. But sometimes the patient suffers from the hemodynamic collapse. So in that situation, you should go ahead with ketamine 1 to 2 milligram per kilogram with glycopyrrolate, so that the patient should not have secretions. You should use generous dosing of neuromuscular blockers, rocuronium 1.5 milligram per kg or suxmethylnium 1.5 milligram per kg. Do not hesitate to give full dose, because if the patient is light in anesthesia and during intubation part, if patient coughs out, you are the person who is going to suffer most. So give generous dosing of neuromuscular blocker. If you are not sure about the airway difficulty part, better to use rocuronium, because it will give you a longer time of anesthesia, paralysis, so that you can at least handle the airway in a proper way rather than not in hastily. If the patient is crashing, you should have vasopressor bolus or infusion ready with you. You should not go ahead and run here and there to get that. Cricoid pressure, different schools of thought are there. Sometimes people say you should use cricoid pressure, but during the cricoid pressure, maybe you are going close to the patient's face or neck region. So you are actually exposing yourself more. Or maybe during the intubation part, cricoid pressure may create more difficulty for the intubator, and he or she may be finding it difficulty to intubate. So maybe cricket pressure is controversial. Depending on the situation, you can go ahead. Intubation part, routine use of video laryngoscope is recommended because you should try to get it in first attempt. Go for the correct depth. Maybe you are actually going ahead 1 to 2 centimeter below the vocal cord. You should watch the black mark is actually going past the vocal cord. Cup should be inflated immediately before you go ahead with positive pressure ventilation here. And viral filter should be applied directly to the end of the tracheal tube. There should not be any distance between the viral filter and the tracheal tube. You should measure the cup pressure so that there should not be any leak, and chances of getting that aerosol is more for you or your staff. This is the incorrect attachment. I have kept it because you should know that there should not be any connection. The airway filter, the viral filter should be directly connected to the endotracheal tube. Then there is a concept which has come recently in NEJM. We all know that there is actually splash of aerosols during your intubation, and this looks like under ultraviolet. You can see here that these aerosols are actually falling on the face shield. So how to prevent that? So somebody has come up with the suggestion that you should have one garbage bag over the patient's head with armholes. You can see here. So you can keep that garbage bag over the patient's face so that the patient is not actually coughing or the aerosols are not directly coming to you. It looks like this. Or maybe you can use aerosol box, which has come in the internet. Everybody was fascinating that we should have one aerosol box in our ICU or hospital. Does it create really helpful for the intubating person? Studies have shown that the pros are maybe it is good for anti-splash or if the patient is directly coughing, and may it work for the uncomplicated elective intubations where you are not going to face any major problem. But the cons are really in more number because it's a misnomer that it prevents the aerosols from come, whatever you are using. Currently, there is no evidence that this box prevents dispersion of aerosols. And in obese patients, it will not fit at all. And also, if you are facing any difficulty during intubation, your hands are inside that, stuck up in the aerosol box, and you are actually creating more problem for you and for the patient. And if you are actually creating ramping up of the patient, if the patient is desaturating fast, definitely you will not leverage, you will not have that lever to handle that, the airway manipulation, your laryngoscope or your stillate bougie. And if it falls down inadvertently, definitely it will injure you as well as your staff. So definitely it's a pro-con debate. The cons will win over the pros in this aerosol box. Coming to the airway rescue, if you are actually really having difficulty getting the normal airway in a first or second attempt, you should go ahead with video assisted fiber optic intubation, or you should go ahead with supraglottic airway for the tracheal tube. But the rescue face mask ventilation, you should use oropharyngeal airway, and then with low gas flow, you should go ahead with the rescue face mask ventilation. Then if anything you are actually trying but you are not getting success, you should go ahead with euphona, but the mechanism, the method is scalpel bougie euphona technique, not typical nasal cannula high flow oxygen ventilation, because that will create more aerosols and you are actually exposing yourself and also your staff to the COVID chances more. Then attempts to deliver oxygen during your airway rescue procedures, you should not try to give oxygen from above during the performance of the procedure in the neck, because that will again create more aerosols for the performer to get. This is the typical guideline or algorithm for cannot intubate, cannot oxygenate, SICO from the anesthesia 2020 guideline. So everybody should go ahead and read this, how to go ahead with the front of neck airway intervention. Then coming to the post intubation, you have already intubated the patient, but if the patient's COVID-19 status is not confirmed, you are suspecting, so maybe you should go ahead with a deep tracheal aspirate using closed suction at that time itself. You should go ahead with the nasogastric tube immediately after intubation, because anything doing these procedures, you are actually exposing more. So two procedures at the same time. Also, you should go ahead with the central line if you are thinking that this patient needs it. because the more number of times you are coming to the room to do procedures, you are actually harming more. Laryngoscope blade should be bagged immediately and you should seal it for sterilization. And you should use always double zip locked plastic bag with a double globe technique. You should remove the first globe, keeping the laryngoscope blade, and then holding that, keep it in the zip locked plastic bag so that there will not be any chance of contamination of your other bed parts, then the patient's body part or your own dresses or the monitors, anything else. PP should be removed or doffed using a spotter. There should be one person who will be checking that you are going ahead with the proper process of donning and doffing. Chest X-ray should usually be performed after putting the central line, and you should debrief at the end of the intubation part where you have done rightly and where you have done wrongly, so that in the next airway management part you will not repeat that. Coming to the extubation practice, the patient is in your ICU, he or she is improving, and now you are trying to extubate the patient. Normally, we expect that during the treatment, patient is right now not that type of infective, but you never know. So normally, we should try to extubate the patient to face mask rather than any supraglottic airway or any other intervention is needed. It is again a 2 staff member team which should do extubation, and same level of PP should be practiced during the extubation also. This is very important. Do not encourage to cough, which we normally do for other normal patients. We normally tell them to cough so that the secretion will come out. But here, the difference from the other patients is you should not encourage the patient to cough. Rather, you should use something which will create less of cough reflex. That is, maybe you can give some IV lignocaine or maybe dexmedetomidine or maybe small amount of opioid so that the patient will not have that stress or maybe that not. If you are not able to extubate the patient properly and you are thinking that you should go ahead with a tracheostomy, so very important that you should defer it till the active COVID-19 disease is resolved. This is one important point I want to share. Do not go ahead with maybe a patient is with 5 days or 7 days of ICU and you are thinking to tracheostomize. If unless otherwise strong indication is there, you should defer it, because tracheostomy is again one high risk aerosol generating procedure. Then immediately ICU care after intubation, you should attach the viral filter, the HM filter, the inline suction catheter system. In case of planned disconnection, if you are trying to disconnect for some reason, then you should keep the ventilator on standby. That is very important. And again, you have to use the clamp to use at the tube so that before disconnecting, it is there in the place. Otherwise, there will be the exhalation and you are actually exposing yourself and your staff to the viruses. And ensure ventilation is recommenced after you are actually reconnecting to the ventilator part. Then coming to the nebulization practices, people have some problem whether to go ahead with conventional nebulization or not. If you are at all using nebulization, the room has to be negative pressure room. Try to use metered dose inhaler for the nebulization part or IV parenteral medications for the bronchodilation rather than giving the topical or maybe the typical nebulization. And in case you are using non-vented mask should be preferred. And this is the normal setup how you should attach the nebulizing chamber before your typical catheter mount and the BiPAP mask or the endotracheal tube. You should use there. If the patient is posted for urgent surgery in the COVID-19, normally we expect the patient will not have severe form of respiratory problem. If you are thinking that the surgery is not urgent, you can delay it till the patient is actually non-infective. That's why we normally close the elective OT during the COVID pandemic. If you are at all using for the surgery, then use a dedicated COVID-19 theater in your hospital and try to use regional anesthesia rather than fiddling with the airway. for the general anesthesia. But if the surgery requires general anesthesia, then definitely you have to go ahead with neutral, or you have to change the positive pressure room to the negative pressure. You should at least call the engineering department and disable the positive pressure room. Number of air exchanges, you have to tell them to increase per hour. The normal recommendation is at least 12 air exchanges per hour. And early consultation with the engineering department, rather the patient is posted and nobody has actually this type of thinking that we need to disable the positive pressure. This should not happen. If the patient is posted for urgent surgery, then you have to first secure the airway. Till that time, you tell your surgical and the non-anesthesia or the related staff to wait outside the proper OR room so that they will not be exposed to the aerosols. Sufficient time should be allowed for any aerosol generated during the intubation part to disperse before the other staff members are actually entering into the OR. At least 20 minutes. This is the recommended time before you allow the surgeon and the other persons to enter into the room. Then everybody should use aerosol protective PP. Who are there in the theater? The surgeon, the anesthetist, the housekeeping, everybody. And try to recover the patient in the OR itself rather than in the post of anesthesia care unit, because you are actually trying to avoid exposure to other patients and staff. In case you are going ahead with cardiac arrest in this type of patients in the ward, in the ICU, then cardiac compressions should not commence until the responsible staff, the code blue staff are actually in the aerosol protective PP. You should not start it. Number of people, again, you should keep minimum, and compression only CPR is advocated until you are securing the airway with a viral filter in place. You cannot give rescue breathe or back mask ventilation to these patients without securing the airway with viral filter. This is very important. And early tracheal intubation by a skilled airway operator, by the senior most airway expert, should secure the airway. Then maybe with supraglottic airway placement is a better option if you are unable to intubate immediately, rather than putting the patient on face mask ventilation and exposing everybody. Do not use the stethoscope and listen for the breathing during the CPR. This is a wrong practice, and you have to think about that whether you should continue for a long time in these patients or not, depending on the clinical condition. Because these patients, once going into like ventilator and then patient is having cardiac arrest, chances of survival are really less. There are so many protocols, algorithm by different societies before, like typical this one, before how you should do, during, after. So you should go ahead with this type of things in your hospital. You should practice this in your ICU, in your OT, and get everybody ready before this type of patients come to your OR or emergency department. I will highly recommend that you should have some early warnings course before you should go ahead with the unplanned or disastrous situations where you are actually creating more problem for everybody. There should be shared and predefined strategies for airway securing in these patients. Multidisciplinary team training, I should always advise that we should go with team training, because these type of situations never happen regularly. So in the pandemic situation, you should create your own team so that they are ready to face this type of situation. Better with simulation and regular and repeated education. There are so many guidelines. I have taken this from two important guidelines, one from UK, that is from Intensive Care Society and Anesthesia, and one from the Australian guideline, which is Safe Airway Society. And this is the recent one, recommendation for endotracheal intubation in COVID-19 patients. You can go ahead in your leisure time. Finally, I will complete with few mantras to get success in this type of patients. For airway management, you should have intensive training, early intervention, meticulous planning. You should always take care of your infection control part. Airway management has to be efficiently done. There should be clear communication among your team members, and you should always go ahead with standardized practice, not unusual things you are trying to do in a COVID patient. You are not actually well versed with the procedures you are dealing with, and you are trying this on a patient who is actually creating or highly contagious to the other healthcare workers. In summary, I will quote this one from Anesthesia 2020 guideline, SAS, SAS. You should do airway management, which should be safe for your staff and patient. It should be accurate, avoiding unreliable, unfamiliar, and repeated technique. You should always call the senior most person, and the procedure should be done swiftly, timely, without enough rush or enough delay. It should be in proper time. Finally, the three pictures, it should be swiftly, because airway management in this type of patients, you are not the only person who is creating the benefits. If the housekeeping also in your intubating room, if he is not going ahead with the proper isolation practices, then he is creating problem for everybody. If you are okay, you are doing your procedure, you are doing your things properly, but if your team members are not following you properly, then you are all at risk. Finally, this type of situation creates more tasking on you, on your members. They are all worried, so you have to take the bandwidth of every member at the same level. And finally, this happens only through repeated training simulation. Preferably, you should go ahead with a checklist rather than thinking so many things at one point of time. One person should use a checklist so that the things are done, and he or she should give a tick mark so that we are doing the thing rightly and in time. We can ask our experts what they think about the airway management in this type of patients. Thank you, all of you, for patiently watching and listening to me. So, Dr. Kaur and Dr. Sananta, if you have anything to share your experience for the junior intensivists who are actually at the front line trying hard to save COVID pandemic patients.
That was an excellent presentation, Dr. Tapus, and you covered almost all the things the way it should be. In my center, we have been doing lots of simulation on the COVID patient, the anticipated COVID patient. And even after, I have attended at least 10 of them, and each day we do at least a couple of them. But each time I find something is a lacuna in the whole process, which is almost there invariably, and that can blow up the whole process. So it's very important that each of the hospitals should practice this before they encounter it, because it is a very complicated process, and there is a high chance that you will have a fallacy, will have a flaw in the whole process, and that can jeopardize the whole process. One of my colleagues says it's just like a chain. So if you have a weak segment, the chain doesn't work. As you said, even the housekeeping is the most important person. I believe it is. So we should have a regular practice of it. The way to overcome it is to have a visual representation of the steps. We have around 6 negative pressure rooms in our hospital, and each of the room had a visual display of the steps when you are managing a airway of a COVID positive patient. We try to follow the same steps with a visual chart, irrespective of any of the consultant doing the intubation or any of the senior registrars doing the intubation. So it just to make sure that we are not using our common sense, we are going by something which is written on the wall, and there is very less chance of failure to it. That's the most important part. Everybody can, I mean, most of us can easily intubate a normal patient, but it's a COVID-19 positive patient, and at the at the time when everything is going haywire for an emergency intubation, the best way to go ahead is with a visual chart, somebody reading out the step, and you are doing it correctly rather than relying on your common sense at that moment. I think that's the only or the most important take home from any discussion about it, about airway management in COVID-19.
Very
That's my
nice.
important view at this stage. Yep.
Yeah, that is the most important thing. Regular practice and with a checklist may be the solution in this type of stressful situation. I agree.
How will you confirm equal air entry on both sides without auscultation? It will take time to obtain X-ray film. That's very, very much relevant question at this stage. So Tapas has touched the base on that. So when you are intubating a patient, it's a video laryngoscope, first of all, right? Unless you see the glottic opening, you're not putting a bougie or a tube inside it. So that's the confirmatory evidence for this type of intubation to start with. Number one. Number two is the application of a EtCO2, uh, EtCO2 tubing into the viral filter or into the HME filter, whichever way you do it. That's the second way of confirming it. We discourage auscultation of the chest because it's another step complicating the whole process, right? So I would say direct visualization of the cords and the bougie and the tube going through it. And number two is the EtCO2. Again, the EtCO2 connecting it into the tube is a important step when the whole process can jeopardize. So make sure that you are clamping the endotracheal tube before connecting anything to the tube, right? And also, if you are going to disconnect the circuit, always disconnect after the viral filter. That's the most important thing. So clamp and disconnect after the viral filter. It's not before the viral filter, because I don't know which type of ventilator all of us use, but there are a definite difference of ventilators, and even if you, unless you switch it off, the ventilator will give a breath, and that will contaminate the whole room. Regarding the X-ray, doing the X-ray for confirmation of the tube, ideally there should be at least 20-minute gap between any significant aerosolization procedure and doing another procedure such as a chest X-ray or putting a line in if you don't need to. Okay, so at least 4 air exchanges should be allowed before a aerosolizing procedure. So to summarize, I will say go by your direct visualization, the tube going into the glottis with a video laryngoscope. If you don't have that, then it will be the EtCO2 confirming that. Now there are increasing evidence of ultrasound use uh, to confirm the position of the tube into the trachea and equal air entry on both sides of the chest using the ultrasound. But again, it depends on how qualified and how comfortable you are doing a lung ultrasound at that moment. In our unit, I can tell my practice. So we go by video laryngoscope. We go second check is the EtCO2. Third check is the chest ultrasound that we do. We have a dedicated COVID ultrasound machine in my unit. So that's how we are planning to do the things. Other thing Dr. Tapas told to see that black line is just past the vocal cords. That at least tells you that you are not right endobronchial or right main bronchus is not endobronchial tube in there. So just put the tube just past the black line beyond the cord, and I think in 99.9% cases you'll be safe with it.
Yeah. So this is the like whole summary how you should check after putting the tube. Then how to disinfect video laryngoscope. Again, very relevant question. We normally prefer that it should be disposable. If your hospital is providing disposable covering of the video laryngoscope, so you have to use it and later on you have to remove that and you have to use it afterwards in other patients. But in case it is not disposable, reusable, so you have to take every precaution to keep that in a double glove technique in a sealed pocket, or like I have already showed that you have to keep it and you have to send it for, if your hospital is providing ETO or you are actually going ahead with disposing that because this patient is really infective, then that is your call. But definitely you should always prefer disposable video laryngoscope coverings. Like in ER, if negative pressure room is not there, what to do? Yeah. So I have already discussed negative pressure room is preferable and is highly recommended. If your hospital is not having, at least you have to create a neutral pressure room with the closed door, and maybe you can try to have the procedure and then you do it any other aerosol generating procedure after 20 minutes, as Dr. Sananda has already told. So it is never a positive pressure room, better negative pressure room, or else neutral room with more number of air exchanges. You have to tell the electric department, engineering department to go ahead with at least 4 air exchanges in 20 minutes.
I have a very pertinent question because you guys are working in India and Australia, particularly Sanand. How
Yes.
many of your patients are for COVID actually are getting into a ventilator? And second, in this situation, particularly in India,
Yeah.
where the testing is not that rampant, and we are day by day we are seeing a lot of unsuspected patients coming up with a positive results. Don't you think it should be a universal precaution for almost all the patients undergoing intubation? Right. Particularly the way we have changed our practice after HIV and HBS, all this hepatitis came, that we have started putting up all our gloves and all this. So sort of the idea of universal precaution. I think in this situation, we should adopt universal precaution for almost every patient. So that becomes a little difficult proposition. So please give your suggestion about it, both of you.
Right, Dr. Arindam. That's a very important, pertinent question here because we don't know who is COVID positive and who is COVID negative. And if you need to intubate someone, we should have universal precautions. Yeah. At this moment, I can talk about Australia. So, any patient who is presenting to the hospital with a pneumonia is considered to be COVID unless proven otherwise with a PCR. Okay, in any of the hospitals in Australia at this moment, with a severe pneumonia who is coming to the hospital, he is thought to be COVID positive unless proven otherwise with a PCR. So till we have the PCR done, it's COVID precautions with an impervious gown with at least N95 mask and double gloving for aerosol generating procedure.
Yeah,
That's the current practice in my unit and most
yeah,
of the.
that's also.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
The problem
I
to
also
that.
totally second, yeah, to your
Yep. The
airway management, what you are doing in Australia. Yeah.
Right. The problem here is when you look at the data that is coming internationally for last 3 to 4 months, initially they thought it's just like a droplet precaution. They started using universal precautions and got infected. Lots of patients or lots of healthcare workers were initially infected in China. If we go by their data, if we think that data is correct, and the rate of infection came down gradually as they are more aware of the infection control practice and they started using more stringent infection control practice. So it's a recommendation that unless you are doing any aerosolization procedure, you should be having universal precautions with normal surgical mask. You don't need an N95. But I think to me, I would not be comfortable doing procedures in any of these patients unless I'm fully acute because nobody knows what's the best way of going it, and the more you can manage with your protection, the best it is, right? If you go by objective data with other patients, when you are doing an aerosolization procedure, the most common infected part is your neck and your hands, right? So the message will be any patient who is coming to the hospital with a severe pneumonia, treat him as a COVID positive unless you are very sure with a PCR, and then you can always lift your restriction from him. So it is better to be safe in the beginning rather than be sorry at the end. So that's how I go, and that's how most of a clinician here go.
Agreed.
Uh,
I totally echo your suggestions and what you are doing in Australia. We are also here. Any suspect, we are keeping every patient who is coming to ER a suspect COVID patient. And in this scenario, we are also getting COVID positive in CKD patients who are on dialysis, not having any typical respiratory problem. We are also getting positive cases in intracranial bleed patient who are admitted for some other region in some other hospital. So definitely the suspicion you have to keep really high, and you have to use all the universal precautions as well as for the respiratory aerosol protection part also. You have to train your staff, and you have to start from the screening from the emergency gate itself rather than in only ICU or only emergency department or in the OR.
I mean, it's a difficult situation because you have quite a significant number of patients who present with non-respiratory symptoms also, as a diarrhea, as a gastroenteritis, then they come positive as a COVID. So it's very hard. But if you have a clue that the patient is possibly a COVID, then think he is COVID unless proven otherwise. At this moment, I will believe that. For me, the practicality of that situation is you should have a guide who can tell you step by step how to do things rather than based on your knowledge and common sense. Because I can bet at that situation everything will go wrong if you rely on your common sense. So just make sure that you have a protocol in the ICU, have a pictorial description of everything, what to do first, second, third step, fourth step, and each step being divided again, and somebody reads out saying that now the time to don't bag mask, give a 200 milligram of rocuronium for paralyzing the patient, all those steps. So make a step which is being followed by the whole unit, so there is no loophole in doing the procedure. That's the most important part, I think. And of course the guidelines are there. They say what type of mask, what type of gown you need to protect yourself. But I think at this moment the more the better, because the guidelines are based on expert opinion and nobody has faced a previous COVID till date. So guidelines coming that early in the phase of the disease, it's based on only expert opinion, I guess, and from past experience from similar viruses, but not particularly COVID. So go by your instinct and make sure that you are safe. The maximum protection that you can have in that situation, go for it, and then have a plan totally in and which is being followed by the whole unit. Okay, that's what I think the most important message that I want to convey.
Very nice. And finally, concluding, this was the first lecture in this series. We will definitely come up with the controversial and the take-home points in the subsequent lecture series. We'll have one lecture coming up with important salient features about the major guidelines which have come related to COVID-19, and also one about the infection control, how to prevent the infections, the COVID-19 in your healthcare workers. So we'll involve many experts all over the world, and we'll definitely want you to participate. If you have any suggestions, anything you want really from us, maybe in a protocol based, maybe you want a single page algorithm which you can use in your ICU in your hospital for airway management, you are most welcome to request to us. We will be happy to help you out in creating a COVID team, or maybe a COVID intubation team, the airway trolley, anything you want, we can also help you to make that in your hospital. So thanking you all, and we will meet you soon in the next lecture, and we'll keep you posted about the upcoming lectures, the academic initiatives in our SCB forum and as well as in the social media. Thanking you all. Thanking Dr. Sananta for giving your valuable time,
Thanks, Dr.
and
Tapas.
Dr. Arindam Kaur, and all the participants. Please stay safe. Take care of your family. Take care of yourselves, and we will definitely win over this corona war. Thanking you all.